Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira. Today is a special day as the Safe House has opened up its vault door for Jim Rogers, world-renowned investor who started up the Quantum Fund, best-selling author who's written such books as Hot Commodities, Investment Biker, and A Bull in China. He's a global traveler, circled the world twice, and a doting husband and proud father of two beautiful young girls. Jim, welcome to the Safe House.
I am delighted to be here, Patrick. I see all this money around. Makes me feel rich.
That's the goal. Jim, you know, central banks, we're living in a time where central banks, they seem to feel the need to experiment. We've seen quantitative easing. We've seen negative interest rates. We've seen zero interest rates. We've seen bail-ins, bailouts, global debt all over the place. But they feel the need to experiment. Jim, what got us to this point where the central banks or even governments feel the need to experiment just to keep the economies afloat?
Well, they actually think they're doing the right thing. Now, yes, in their off moments, if they don't know they're being recorded, they will admit, oh gosh, this is an experiment. We have no idea what's going on. But the reason is because they've messed up so many places, so many times. They don't know what they're doing. And in the end, they're going to ruin us all. This is more or less their last experiment, their last gas, because when this ends, it's going to be very, very bad, Patrick. You should be worried.
I'm worried. That's why we're having you here, so you can help guide us through all of this. But you've been investing for some 50 years or so.
Yep.
The U.S., how much have you seen it change in that 50 years as far as productivity, wages, as far as the economy?
Well, Patrick, the basic change, when I was a lad, America was a creditor nation. America was a startlingly strong creditor nation, few debts, and a very sound economy, Now, America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. Not in the world, Patrick, in the history of the world. And this has only happened in the last 31 years. As recently as 1987, America was a creditor nation still. I mean, it had been declining, the credit, but now we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. The debts are going higher and higher and higher every day. Nobody's doing anything about it. In fact, they're getting worse. Every country in world history that's gotten itself into this situation has had a crisis or a semi-crisis. I don't particularly like saying this, given that I'm an American citizen, voter, taxpayer, but I have to deal with facts or I'll go broke too.
Yeah, the central banks, the governments, their solution quite often seems to be money printing, print more and more and more. Is there any way that we could possibly prevent central banks or governments from printing money as the only solution?
Close them down.
Close them down.
The world, America's had 3 central banks in our history. The first 2 disappeared for a variety of reasons. Fortunately or unfortunately, this one's going to disappear too, because they made so many mistakes. So when the real crisis comes, people rightly will blame it on the central bank because they're the main culprit at the moment. The only way to stop them is to close them down, because they don't know any better. They're bureaucrats and academics. They think they know what they're doing. They have PhDs from Ivy League universities.
Yeah.
They think they know what they're doing. They don't.
They don't. Jim, you had mentioned U.S. being not just the largest debtor nation, but debtor nation in history. Is there a prescription to fix this? If you had a say, what would you do or submit as a suggestion to fix the economy, to get the U.S. back to being a creditor nation?
Well, there's only one thing you can do, and that would be to cut spending dramatically, cut taxes and cut spending, but especially cut spending. The problem is, Patrick, if somebody ran on that platform, and even if he won, if everybody said, you know, he's right, we've got to do it this time, he won, within 6 months or a year, he'd be assassinated, because people would say, wait a minute, this is worse than we thought. This is too much pain. We're not going to do, we didn't mean this, so he would be gone. So no, the only way it can be solved now is through gigantic problems, and nobody is willing to take the pain. It'll be forced on us, It'll be forced on us, but you cannot solve it without dramatic pain.
Okay. I guess part of that dramatic pain happened back in 1971, going back through these 50 years again, where we saw Nixon temporarily close the gold window. At that time, I'm assuming perhaps you watched it on the news or when it happened. What was your feeling when Nixon first came out and said that they were closing the window?
Well, it was specifically, I was long Japan and short the U.S. And that night, that Sunday night when he did it, the market started reacting instantly. The Japanese market went up 20% in a week. Went down 20% in a week. I was long Japan, went down 20% in a week, and the U.S. market went straight up. So it was not a good week. It was a very painful week at that time. Other than that, other than licking my wounds, I realized that this was a gigantic change in world history, because nearly everybody for decades and even centuries at that point had believed in and used at least a modified gold standard. Right. So it was all gone now, and whatever was going to happen was going to be very, very different.
Okay, so I guess being long Japan, you weren't a favor of the delinking of gold at that time.
No, it was, as I said, it was painful. The Japanese market collapsed. Everybody assumed that this was going to save America. America had problems. The American market had peaked in 1968, been going down. The Japanese market, it's more than you need to know, but the Japanese market had been in great recovery. So had Nixon not done that, I probably would have made a lot of money in that week instead of losing a lot of money in that week. But no, it's very clear that this was an ending of an old era. Very few people even paid attention to gold at all in 1971. America is one of the few nations left that even talked about gold. Yeah. That was the end. When we threw in the towel, that was the end for gold with most central banks. Okay. I mean, some still have gold and some still buy gold, but right. As far as being a moderator or a monitor of the world financial system, it was gone.
Okay. In today's current environment with all the money printing and things going on, do you think that anchoring currencies in some way to gold is still a relevant idea, or is it something that has...
They will probably try it again when things get really bad in their desperation. Patrick, the gold standard has never worked. It's worked for short periods of time. But what happens is, and you go back in history, you see that the gold standard, the reason it never works is because it's a great discipline. You have to run a sound economy, and politicians don't like discipline. So what happens is they always change it. Poor saps like me believe when the politicians say, we're on the gold standard, your money's as good as gold, et cetera, et cetera. We believe them, and then we act accordingly. But then they always change the rules. Throughout history, they change the rules, and people like me, who are simple saps, get wiped out, because gold, any discipline is not good for politicians, and that's why the gold standard has never worked, because they've always changed. They've either abandoned it or changed the rules.
Okay, but Jim, in speaking of this economic collapse, you've even spoken quite a bit about it. In your view, how does it look? I mean, could you paint a picture for us how this collapse would look?
Well, Patrick, if you go back you might remember 2008. In yes. 2008, we had a pretty dramatic financial collapse for many people in the world. The next one's going to be the worst in my lifetime, which means it's going to be worse than 2008. 2008 was caused by too much debt everywhere. Right. But Patrick, since then, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed, even in China. In 2008, the Chinese had a lot of money for a rainy day. It started raining. They started spending the money they had saved for a rainy day, and they helped save the world. Now even China has a lot of debt. So the next time, all of this debt is going to cause staggering problems for everybody, and there's nobody to bail us out except except the central banks are going to do everything they can to print money or buy assets or whatever.
Right.
For a while it will cause a rally, but then the market's going to say, listen, we don't care. We're not going to play this game anymore. We know this is garbage. That's the end.
Yeah. You know, on a personal note, at the end of the day, you go home to your family, your wife and your two lovely daughters. Do they ask you questions about the things that you say, and how do you respond to them?
Well, my daughters are too young. One is 10. She barely knows anything. And the one who's 15 has just started asking questions like you said. And I've just started answering the question because she never asked. You know, I don't, in my experience, if you try to teach something to people when they're not interested, you're wasting your time. So my daughters are now, one of them is now beginning to ask the questions. My wife, of course, has listened. She's listened since we met because she has some kind of comprehension of what I'm talking about.
Okay, well, it's good. I mean, I always felt it's important that your spouse understand these things.
My wife understands.
Great. This next upcoming economic crisis, do you feel it's going to be greater than the Great Depression, or do you feel it's going to be more hyper than Weimar?
It could well be worse than the 1930s. It will depend on the reaction of politicians in Washington, other places. It might very well be, because if you look at the politicians around the world right now, they have absolutely no comprehension, no understanding, and they always think they can save us. They think they can do things better. And the central banks think that. The American Central Bank thinks we're all Ivy League PhDs, so we don't have to worry. Well, it's going to be the worst in my lifetime, which is plenty bad. I assure you it's plenty bad. Whether it's as bad as the 30s or not, I don't know. You ask me when it's further along.
You mentioned, you do say quite often that the 21st century is going to be the century for China. Is the economic collapse going to be the catalyst that propels China to that level, or is this something that can just gradually happen?
Well, China is going to be affected too. Don't think China's going to come out of this thing, or when it's happening, China's going to say, oh, this is great, now everything's great for us. America became the most successful country in the 20th century. Along the way, we had 15 depressions with a D. We had a horrible civil war. We had very little rule of law. We had massacres in the streets. You could buy and sell. You could buy and sell Congress. You could still buy and sell congressmen, but in those days they were very cheap. We had massive bankruptcies. We fleeced a lot of foreign investors who invested in the U.S. because it was, quote, a new frontier, and they lost a lot of money. So China's going to have plenty of problems. Don't think they won't. There'll be bankruptcies. It's going to surprise everybody, including me, and I just told you they're going to happen, but we're all going to be panicked when China starts having its problems. But in the end, when we come out the other side, China will be far ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah, I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of booms and busts during this collapse. There's going to be a lot of winners and losers. But your opinion, who do you think the winners will be?
Not many. I hope I survive. I hope I survive it, because it's going to be pretty horrible. Well, Asia will be ahead of the West, will be ahead of Europe. Europe has gigantic debts, even Italy, even China, even Germany, countries which supposedly say that everything's okay or that we have things under control now. Even the Germans, for goodness sakes. The Swiss, oh my God, the Swiss, what a disaster. When I was a kid, the Germans and the Swiss and the Dutch and the Austrians, there was nothing sounder. Now, even those countries have serious problems. Yeah. So the West will continue to decline, and Asia will continue to rise, because this is where the assets are. This is where there are debts in Asia, and Asia will have problems, as I said before, but Asia will come out the other side much better.
Right, Business School 101. You do business where the money is. But U.S. dollar, will it come out of this okay? Will it still be the world's reserve currency?
No. I own a lot of U.S. dollars right now, a lot of U.S. dollars, because what will happen, Patrick, when there's a crisis or turmoil, people look for a safe haven.
Yes.
They think the U.S. dollar is a safe haven. So the U.S. dollar is going to get overpriced. It could even turn into a bubble, depending on how bad the turmoil is. At which point, I'll sell my U.S. dollars and put it into something else. You see how easy it is to get rich. We just got rich. I just told you the bubble's coming in the U.S. dollar. I'm going to sell it at the top, put my money somewhere else, and then everything will be okay. But the U.S. dollar, no. And the problem, of course, is what will the world do? It might grab for gold. It might grab for some other SDRs. Yeah. It might try for some of these other absurd schemes that will not work. No, it's going to be a big mess. But the U.S. dollar is, as you know, there are already many countries trying to get away from the U.S. dollar because the U.S. dollar has a monopoly, which means that if Washington doesn't like you, they put the clamps on you and you cannot use U.S. dollars. So many countries are already not looking for, they are developing alternate currencies, alternate mediums of exchange. The Turks and the Russians just last month decided to start trading among them, between themselves in their own currencies. Many countries are doing that now, and they're looking for something to compete with, if not replace the U.S. dollar. It's coming. I don't like saying it. I'm an American, but it's coming.
Same with you there. But as things start to shift, China, the living standards go up, productivity goes up, their wealth goes up. In contrast to the U.S., how is their productivity and living standards going to look as China rises and the U.S. starts to slip?
Patrick, in 1918, Great Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number two. There was no competitor in 1918. Look at the UK now. I mean, people are still there, having a good time, making money, some getting very, very rich. But the UK is nothing like what it was in 1918 compared to the rest of the world. So the US, but it's still there. Don't think it disappeared. Yeah. Spain was once like this. Many countries have been in this position. The U.S., the standard of living will decline. It already is declining in the U.S. So it's in process of happening, and it's going to come out of this much worse, just like the U.K.
As powers, economies start to shift over to Asia, how do you think Singapore will fare?
It's a very good question. If you can answer that, you'll be rich. Singapore has done a remarkable job and has become the most successful country in the last 40 years. There's no question about that. Will it be in the next 40 years? Unlikely, because nobody in history has done something that long and that well. But at the moment, I would not bet against Singapore. If you're looking around the world, Singapore is certainly a very stable, successful place to be.
Right. During this crisis, economic crisis, what would your overall advice be to investors during that time?
If I knew that, Patrick, I'd be rich. No, the main advice is only invest in what you yourself know a lot about. Right. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody else that you see on the internet or TV or something. Because if you start investing in hot tips or things you don't understand, when things get bad, you're going to have no clue what to do, and you're really going to lose a lot of money. So if you don't know anything that you know a lot about, don't put your money in the bank. But even that, Patrick, is a problem, because which bank? True. Which country? Which currency? You know, where do you put your money? Because current people in 2007 who saw a problem coming and put a lot of money into cash in Iceland got wiped out. The Icelandic krona got destroyed. So you have to be careful about where you put your money as well.
I believe you also mentioned that during this economic crisis, the upcoming one, you expect gold to go into a bubble. Could you explain a little bit in detail why you expect gold to go into that bubble, and is it something we should be looking at?
Well, I expect gold to go down first. I haven't bought any serious gold in a long time, since 2010. I haven't sold any gold. I still own plenty of gold and plenty of silver. Don't think I don't. I would expect, my expectation is that gold will go down, silver will go down, at which point I hope I'm smart enough to buy a lot. I told you before the U.S. dollar is going to go higher. often, when the dollar is very strong, people don't buy gold and silver go down. Many things go. In fact, all currencies go down against gold, against the U.S. dollar. So the U.S. dollar will be strong. It'll be turn into a certainly overpriced, maybe a bubble. Gold and silver will go down. Other currencies will go down. At which point, I'm going to sell my U.S. dollars at the top, buy gold and silver. I mean, probably will buy gold and silver at that point. It could be renminbi, the Chinese currency, if it's convertible by then. But it's most likely will be the gold and silver.
Okay.
You understand that throughout history, people in turmoil and in crisis buy gold and silver. Doesn't matter whether they should or not. That's what they do.
Right.
So you cannot tell 5,000 years of human history, don't buy gold and silver in this collapse. Buy something else. They're going to buy gold and silver.
Do you think it's going to be at that time where you see people flooding into the market to try and buy it as the collapse is pretty obviously happening? Or should they be moving on ahead while the price is low before?
Well, you're always supposed to buy low and sell high, Patrick. I'm sure your parents taught you that. The best approach to any investing is to buy when nobody wants it, when everybody's ignoring you and not paying any attention. Or it's better still if they laugh at you. So no, you should definitely buy anything. Whatever's going to be the great salvation in the next few years, if it's down now, you should be buying it now. And gold and silver happen to be down. I'm not buying it yet, but it's certainly not a time to sell gold and silver.
You wrote the book Hot Commodities, How Anyone Can Invest Profitably in the World's Best Market. Commodities this year, they're under a bit of pressure. Are they still a good sector to be in?
Well, when you say they, there are many commodities, so
right.
Some are, some aren't. At the moment, you probably should, if you're going to buy commodities, you should probably buy agriculture. Agriculture has been a disaster for a long, long time. I don't know if I would buy, well, I don't know. They're all down right now, as you point out. So yes, anything that's down is probably going to be a better place to put money than to think. Amazon is making all-time highs. It goes up every day. Yeah. I think I'd rather buy any commodity than Amazon or some of those stocks that go up every day and that never go down.
Right. So if you were to buy those commodities, could you let us in on perhaps the three that you would be looking at?
Well, I'm not that smart. Well, the ones that are down, sugar's collapsing. Probably sugar, maybe silver. It's a huge short position in silver right now. Sugar, silver, and I'd have to find what else is down the most. Gold obviously is down too, but I've already explained I'm looking for a better chance to buy gold. One of the agriculture, I don't know which one, whichever one of the agricultural commodities is down a lot. That's probably where that would be my third.
Okay, as long as it's not a vegetable, otherwise my wife is going to make me buy and start eating vegetables. But what are your views on electric vehicles? For instance, China, they're pretty much the world leader in electric vehicles, and they are looking at commodities such as nickel and cobalt. Have you taken a look at these commodities, and have you heard of the electric vehicle revolution that seems to be
I've certainly heard of electric vehicles. We all have. You may or may not know that Henry Ford's wife, had an electric car. Oh. She didn't like his gasoline or petrol-driven engine. She liked the electric. That was her favorite car. I mean, in the end, Henry Ford and the automobile, the petrol automobile won out. So I'm sure that electric vehicles have a great future. Everybody seems to love them for many reasons. It's certainly a joy to be in them. They're quiet, they're smooth. Lots of the problems with the gasoline or petrol-driven engine is not there. So yeah, I'm sure they have a great future. Governments love them for many reasons. So yes, they're coming. Is it going to change some things? Of course it is. People will have to use different metals, as you've already pointed out, and gasoline, petrol will probably not be as big a demand as it has been before. But you do remember that the electricity has to be made from something. So
Sure.
don't think that oil and coal and things are going to disappear, because you still got to have electricity.
Right.
So it will not be as big demand for petrol, for gasoline as it was before, but you'll still have to have some oil.
I guess in keeping on this topic, the nickel, the cobalt, are these two metals attracting attention for you right now?
Any commodity right now is worth looking at because of what's happened. You mentioned before that they've been having problems for a while. So yes, of course, cobalt, there's no public market in cobalt, so for me it's not that simple. But certainly nickel and some of the others people are very excited about, and if it happens, and it seems that it is going to happen, some of these metals are going to have a great future.
Other metals, we're surrounded by them: silver, gold. Current ratio today, it's in the mid 80 range, 85 or so to 1, 85 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. I think this is about the second lowest price silver has been relative to gold because of this ratio. Is it a good time for silver?
Well, I said
Buy
before,
silver?
I'm not buying gold, although, and I hasten to tell you, right now in the futures markets, there's a gigantic short position in gold and in silver.
Right.
Historically, when that happens, they go up. They go up for a while. And undoubtedly gold and silver will go up for a while because of this gigantic short position. Am I buying? No, I just told you it's going to go up, but I'm not buying. I'm still waiting for the big collapse. But if you wanted to buy one of the two, you just pointed out, historically, on a historic basis, silver's much, much cheaper than gold right now. So if you had to buy one, silver's probably a better buy than gold. I'm not buying either at the moment, but silver's certainly a better buy than gold. I do have a commodity index, which has fortunately outperformed the other commodity indexes. And if people want to invest in commodities, that's certainly a sound way. History shows it's less bad than other indexes or other things. I mean, if you're really good at picking commodities, buy them. Don't listen to me. Do it if you know what you're doing. Otherwise, index investing is best for most people. You can read my books if you want to. My daughters actually own my trademarks on the copyrights on my books now, so you'll make them rich, not me.
Okay. Well, we'll make them rich, I suppose. And going back to the economic crisis where we've talked about gold being in a bubble, do you expect silver to follow in tandem with gold?
Yeah. Because silver, they will both turn into, if gold turns into a bubble, silver will turn into a bubble too. And it's maybe even more likely given the fact that silver is easier for most people to buy and understand. But they're both, if gold turns into a bubble, I assure you, silver will too.
Okay.
And maybe even a bigger bubble, because as you just pointed out, on a relative basis, silver is much, much cheaper than gold right now. So it may have a bigger bubble.
Okay. Jim, you mind sharing with us what are you currently working on nowadays? I know you have some businesses in Russia, I think.
Well, I do have, I have investments in Russia, I have investments in China, various places. Mainly my daughters. I never wanted to have children before, but now I have these two fabulous young girls, and after decades of being anti-children, I'm trying to make up for it now. So the main thing I like to spend my time on now is my daughters. I do have investments, I do have directorships, and et cetera, but if you ask me what I would like to do tonight, I'd rather be with my daughters than just about anything.
That's a great answer. I think that's the best answer we've heard so far during all these interviews.
I hope so.
Jim, we thank you for visiting us here in the vault.
Thank you,
and
Patrick.
we wish you all the best.
It's a delight to see it. You know, I was here when it first started. Great success, great progress. Somebody's got the good sense to put their money in a sound vault somewhere.
Okay, thanks again, Jim. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
My pleasure.
Thanks.